Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Allahumma salli wa sallam wa barik ala Sayyidina wa Nabiyyina wa Mirana Mawlana wa Shafa'ina wa Habibina Muhammad. Taha Yasin Hameen Khatim al-Nabiyyin al-Mursal rahmatan lil-alamin min Rabbil alamin sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Salam ala jami' al-anbiya wa mursalin wa jami' malaikati muqarrabin وعدد آل الكساء وآل البيت الكرام وأصحابه مخلصين وتبعهم وأولياء الله الصالحين وعلماء المتقين وشهداء مطهرين وجامع مشايخنا ومرابين مرشدين إلى الله تعالى. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين وعما بعد. Alhamdulillah. This is the continuation of the second night of the talk on Fatimah az-Zahra. The first part, we had an introductory part to it at the Al-Bayt Council in Northern Virginia, and then we decided, because it's a long talk and it takes a lot to understand it. So just to kind of go back over just very briefly last night, what we spoke about first of all was we started with the ayat قُلْ لَا أَسْأَلُكُمْ عَلَيْهِ أَجْرًا إِلَى مَوَادَّةَ فِي الْقُرْبَةِ. Say, I do not ask any reward of you, say the love of those who are near to me. And the next ayat, that was from Surah Shura, and then the next ayat was إِنَّمَا يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ لِيُعَذِّبْ أَنْكُهُمْ رِجْسًا عَلَى الْبَيْتِ وَيُطَهِّرَكُمْ تَطْهِيرًا. Allah only wishes to remove impurity from you, O people of the house, and to purify you with a thorough purification, from Surah Al-Ahzab. And so the first thing we will try to identify is who is this Ahlul Bayt and who they are. And we had hadith from Sahih Muslim and Ibn Kathir and Sayyuti and Bayhaqi and so on and so forth, all that show that these people of Ahlul Bayt were these people who went under the cloak with the Prophet ﷺ, and they are the Prophet ﷺ, his daughter Fatimah, his son-in-law and cousin Ali, and Al-Hassan, his oldest grandson, and Al-Hussein, his younger brother. These five people, that is who were meant by that. And then we spoke about the nature of Fatimah alayha salam, and what she did and how she did it, and her generosity, but mostly the care that she had for her father, and how her love for him and his love for her, to the point where he said of her that she is the mother of her father. And I go back to that point because that's a very important point to understand in all of this. She is the mother of her father. She's the mother of her father, and she's the wife of his cousin, and in reality almost like son. And this is an important point of understanding. So I want to continue on from there, inshallah, and remind you of the story of how the people who had come to Fatimah for feeding, and how she had fed them, and when she had nothing herself and she found food for them, and so on and so forth. And then there was the ayat from Surah Al-Insan, إِنَّا نُطْعِمُكُمْ لِوَجْهِ اللَّهِ لَا نُرِيدُ مِنْكُمْ جَزَاءً وَلَا شُكُورًا, that we feed you only out of the desire for the presence of Allah, and we don't ask any reward from you or any thanks. In other words, the only thanks that they have are from Allah. And on those lines, there was an old man from the Banu Sulaym tribe who had embraced Islam, and the Prophet ﷺ asked him, "Do you have any fortune?" And he said, "By Allah, Ya Rasulullah, I am the poorest one among 3,000 people of Banu Sulaym." And the Prophet ﷺ glanced at his companions, radiallahu ta'ala anhum, and said, "Who is going to help this poor person?" And Hazrat Sa'ad ibn Ubadah, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, stood up and said, "Ya Rasulullah, I have a camel and I will give it to him." And the Prophet ﷺ said, "Who is there among you to cover his head?" And Ali stood up and took his turban off of his head and put it on the head of the man. And then the Prophet asked, "Who is going to give him food?" And Salman Farsi, radiallahu ta'ala an, took the Bedu along with him and went to arrange food for him. And he asked from some people, but he didn't receive anything from them. So finally he knocked at the door of Sayyidah Fatimah, because that was always the last resort. And she asked who it was, and he told it was Salman, and he told her the story. And he said to her, "Yo, daughter of the Messenger of Allah, help me to get some food for this poor man, please." And the tears filled her eyes, because her heart was very, very tender. And Sayyidah Fatima replied, "Ya Salman, wallahi, we have had no food ourselves for the last 3 days. And both of the children, Yani Hassan and Hussein, have gone to sleep hungry. But I'm not going to let you go empty-handed. Take my shawl to the pawnbroker Shamun, the Jew, and ask him to keep this shawl of Fatima, the daughter of Muhammad, and give something to this poor man." Salman took the Bedouin along with him to the house of the Jew and told him the whole story. Startled by this news, he cried out, "Ya Salman, by God," or whatever name that he used for God, "these are the people about whom the Torah has informed us about. Be my witness. I believe in the father of Fatima." And he gave some grain to Salman for the poor man, and also returned the shawl back to Sayyidah Fatima. This was, again, to understand the generosity and the nobility of Sayyidah Fatima. And in view of these characteristics and more besides them, you can imagine the holiness and the happiness that Fatima and Ali enjoyed by the grace of Allah and with the blessings of the Prophet ﷺ. Sayyidina Ali ﷺ said, "Wallahi, I never angered Fatima. I never forced her to do something she did not like up to the day she died. Nor did she ever anger or disobey me. In fact, every time I looked at her, depression and sadness would be removed from my heart." So all of you men who are married, you know, and you know how you think of your wife and so on and so forth, this, you have to think of that in that respect. In the house, Fatima took care of the household work, and Ali took care of all the outside work, such as gathering firewood and bringing food and so on and so forth. It's not known exactly how long that Fatima and Ali resided in that house. That was the house of the Prophet ﷺ, but eventually the Prophet ordered a house for them built next to his own house, which had a door that went into the masjid just like his own. And within a year of that house being built, a boy child was born in this house on the 15th of Ramadan. And before his birth, Fadl radiallahu ta'ala anha dreamt that a piece of the body of the Prophet ﷺ had arrived in her house, and she told the Prophet of this dream, and he said that very soon my daughter Fatima will bear a child who will be brought up by you. And so it was that in the middle of Ramadan, in the 3rd year of the Hijrah, a son was born in a small mud house of Hazrat Ali. And historians write that the birth of this boy child brought great happiness to the holy household, as the earlier accusations of being the Prophet as someone without a line of sons had been proven wrong. The birth of Sidna al-Hasan alayhi salam also brought about an interpretation, yani ta'wil, of Surat al-Kawthar, and the connection of the first ayat to Fatimah as the stream from the Ahlul Bayt flowed and continues to flow from this fountain of Kawthar into this world. Inna a'tainaka al-Kawthar, Allah says. Truly, and you remember that this is when this ayat came to him when he returned from Taif, where he had been stoned and the dogs had been set upon him and the kids had bloodied him, and it was left to a Christian to take him into the garden and dress his wounds and everything like that, and he returned totally rejected. Not only rejected by his own people, having thought that, well, if my own people reject me, I'll try somebody else. Even they rejected him. So he was totally rejected, and at that moment Allah says, Inna a'tainaka al-Kawthar. Fasalli li rabbika wanhar inna shani'aka huwa al-abtar. But he tells him, I have given you the fountain of great abundance. And you must wonder, that if he wondered in these situations if Allah was making a joke with him, because he was at the lowest point of his mission. And I remind you once again that in all the time that he spent in Mecca, all those years, and all of those surahs that came to him, and all of that, he only had gathered 170 people in all of that time from amongst the people of Mecca, until the time he went to Yathrib. So Jibreel told the Prophet ﷺ to call this boy who was born by the name of the son of Harun, which is Shabar, saying, Ali is to you what Harun was to Musa. This you find the story in Bihar al-Anwar. And the Prophet ﷺ asked, he said, with Jibreel ﷺ, give me a name in his own language. And thus he was called Hassan, which was not a name that was ever used in the Jahiliyyah. This word means beautiful, it comes from the root of beautiful, but nobody had ever used that as a name. And the Prophet ﷺ recited the adhan in his right ear and the iqamah in his left ear, and when the time came, he himself shaved the head of Hassan and sacrificed a ram on his behalf. It was only through Fatimah alayha salam that the progeny of the Prophet ﷺ was perpetuated. All of the boy children of the Prophet himself had died in their infancy, and the two children of Zainab, named Ali and Umama, both died young, and Abdullah, the child of Ruqayya, also died when he was only 2 years old, not quite 2 years old. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed Al-Hasan alayhi salam, who grew up literally in the lap of his father and mother and learned his lessons in the school of his grandfather. He had a great worth and a great status in the eyes of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, such as one day when the Prophet was on the mimbar delivering a khutbah to the people, he heard Hassan crying. He came down from the mimbar and he went to calm him down, and then he went back to the mimbar, and the people asked him the reason for this. He says, whenever I hear him cry, I get restless. So this is how he felt about him. And the Prophet ﷺ, having offered his prayer along with the people, would often take Al-Hasan into his lap and would say, whoever loves me must love this child as well. And sometimes he would put him on his shoulder and said, it is hoped that Allah will purify this ummah through him. Or he said, whosoever loves Hassan, and Hassan loves me, and whoever nurses a grudge and is enmity against him has an enmity with me. And he said, Hassan and Hussein, later when he was born, are the two leaders of the youth of the garden. And then he said, Hassan and Hussein are the two earrings of the highest paradise of Allah, and Allah loves them both. So this is, they went to his school and they were greatly loved by him. This is the atmosphere in which they grew up with their mother and father. Father, you have to think, like, imagine this child. His grandfather is the Prophet, his mother and father are Ali and Fatimah, and they are the grandchildren, and they grew up in an atmosphere of this pure love. In any case, in the 4th year of the Hijrah, it was the year in which Hussein was born, on the 3rd of Sha'ban. His name means the little beautiful one, where his brother was called the big beautiful one. And Fatima would often bring these two sons to see their grandfather and to receive their love, and he would often take them to the masjid where they would climb on his back, and we all know these stories, and when he would make sajda, they would jump on him, and just as he did the same thing with his little granddaughter Umama, which is the daughter of her eldest sister Zainab, but she died shortly, didn't live long. In the 8th year after the Hijrah, Fatima gave birth to a 3rd child, and that girl was called Zainab, who was to grow up and become famous as the heroine of Karbala, and because she's the one who really brought this story to all of us. Through Zainab alayha salam, we really know the story of what happened and everything about it. So she is a giant, really, or a very great person in this whole story. And then she had another child who was called Kulthum, after her own sister who had died the year before. And though Fatima was very busy with these pregnancies and giving birth and rearing children like any mom, she took as much part as she could in the affairs of the growing Muslim community in Medina, because suddenly the community had grown by leaps and bounds from the time of this 170 people in Mecca. And before her marriage, she served as much as she could as the caretaker for a very particular group of people, which were the poor and destitute people known as al-Safa, who her father had a great regard for these people and would sometimes actually refuse her needs and Ali's needs and give to them. And from a few up to 80 of these companions could be found on that Safa finally, and during the life of the Prophet. So they started with just a few people and it went up to 80, but they were always, all of them, what was known about them was they were all poor and destitute people. And they had no means of income, and given the trade boycott, because you also have to understand that Medina was an agricultural city rather than a trading city, but it depended upon also not only selling internally its agriculture produce, but in exporting it, they were under sanctions. We know all about sanctions in the modern world, and this was the situation. They were living under sanctions which throttled their economy. Jobs were very hard to find, and these people of the al-Sufa, mainly they collected wood from the nearby forests and things like that to try and supplement their income. But the majority of them were hungry during the day and often at night as well. And occasionally somebody would hang up a bunch of dates from which only the most hungry would pick a few. And by evening the Prophet ﷺ would divide them among the Ansar. And sometimes when he could afford, he would host a few of them himself and invite them into his house and distribute the rest among those who could provide them dinner among the rest of the community. And when he found that he could send a basket or two of dates to them, or whatever like that, he would do that. So I was remember in the beginning I said, you look at the rule, we were talking earlier, what is the situation that prevails in the Muslim world today? What's the situation? Here we have the man we call Khairul Khalqullah, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We all agree is the best of people. This was his thing. He gave everything he had away and asked nothing. That's what he said, I don't ask anything from you but love. It's the only thing he wanted from them, was their love. And he gave everything away. And when we look at the rulers in the world today, whether we start in Africa and Senegal and we go to Indonesia, all across the Muslim world, as I say, all of the what you call them, the people from the various colonists and colonialists and these people, they're all gone now. All of these countries are ruled by Muslims, and we see what's going on. We see the discrepancy when they talk about the Sunnah of the Prophet, what we call them, the pious legal clerks, which they call the ulama. You know, they don't say anything. They allow this to continue. They don't speak up about it. When have you heard this spoken about in khutbahs and so on? You don't hear it spoken about. But there is a growing gap of disparity. When you understand that Jeddah is only 500 or 600 air miles from Mogadishu, and in Somalia we have children dying every 6 minutes, every 7 minutes a child dies. And yet, on the other hand, we find people living a life that we barely can imagine. And so this discrepancy is at the heart of the problem. And the reason I believe, anyway, and Allahu Alam about this, that there is so much pressure against our knowing as a community who these people, this Al-Bayt, who our Prophet ﷺ was, and who these people were, was because the rulers don't really want anybody to know that, because the discrepancy becomes too obvious. And you can see, how could this be? How could this be? I call myself King Abdullah. What does that mean? What does that mean? How could that be? Allah huwa malik al-mulk. But this is what it's come to, and this is the situation that we have. In any case, this is what went on there at that point. And in those early years of the Hijrah, there were a number of battles that went on, which really usually began as ghazwa, or cavalry raids on caravans, in an attempt to interrupt the economic lifeline of the Quraysh, which went back and forth between Mecca and Damascus. And this led to the battles of Badr and Uhud and the ditch. And in the Ghazwat Uhud, or the Battle of Uhud, which was fought in the valley in front of Mount Uhud outside of Mecca, it occurred between a force from the Muslim community of Medina that was led by the Prophet ﷺ and a force that was led by Abu Sufyan ibn Harb, who is the father of Muawiyah. And these people were doing this to avenge their losses at Badr, where the Muslim army had defeated the largest Meccan army. Well, Uhud never really came to any real conclusion, as the way Badr did, and in actuality, a kind of victory slipped from the fingers of the Prophet ﷺ, because the people of Medina became greedy and tried to get booty and spoils. So again, you see this happening. Where does the fatal problem lie? The fatal problem lies in this thing of trying to acquire stuff. This is where the problem at a certain level arises in the whole equation. So now, another thing that happened around the same time that we have to understand, that when this battle of Uhud was over, again Fatimah went to the battlefield, and she took care of the sick people and the dying people, and dressed the wounds, and even the wounds of her own father, who had been injured, remember his tooth and so forth at that time. And she played a role in that particular thing. In other words, she was not just in her house. When we say that she was in her house, she went out into the battlefield actually to succor the troops and the men who had taken part in this battle. And she also accompanied the Prophet ﷺ when he made the Umrah in his 6th year after the Hijrah, after the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, and in the following year she and her sister Kulthum were among the Muslims who took part with the Prophet in Fath al-Makkah, in the opening of Mecca. And it is said that on this occasion both Fatimah and Kulthum visited the home of their mother Khadija and recalled many of their memories of their childhood and so on and so forth like that. Well, in any case, in the 9th year of the Hijrah, before the farewell pilgrimage, an event took place of the utmost significance that is mentioned in many hadith during the 9th or 10th year after Hijrah, where an Arab Christian envoy from Najran in northern Yemen, which was a Christian state at that time, came to the Prophet ﷺ to argue which of the true revelations was true, the Quran or the Injil. They want to say which one of these is right. And he says, فَمَنْ حَجَّكَ فِيهِ مِنْ بَعْدِ مَا جَاءَكُمْ مِنَ الْعِلْمِ فَقُولْ تَلَّوْا نَادُوا أَبْنَاءَ وَأَبْنَاءَكُمْ وَنِسَاءَكُمْ وَأَنفُسَنَا وَأَنفُسَكُمْ ثُمَّ نَبَاتَهِلْ فَنَجْعَلْ نَاتَ اللَّهِ عَلَى كَاذِبِينَ. If anyone argues with you about him, the knowledge has come to you, say, come, we'll bring our sons and your sons, and our women and your women, and we will make a dua, and we'll call down the curse upon the liars. This is called mubahala, and this is what they agreed to do. They were going to, the Christians were going to come here, and they were going to do that, and the Muslims were going to do that from their part, the Prophet ﷺ. And the Prophet ﷺ, to prove that he is the Prophet, brought his daughter Fatimah, and he brought Hassan, and he brought Hussein, and he brought Ali, and he came before the Christians, and he said this was his family, and again he covered himself and his family with a cloak. And all 5 of them got together under the cloak, and again he recited this ayat 33, asking Allah to purify the 5 of them and to keep the impurities, the najasa, away from them. And he prayed to Allah to confirm that these are the people of the house, and asked Allah to keep away all impurities from these people. And Allah sent Jibreel to reveal to the Prophet that all of these people were indeed dear and close to Allah, and they are the purest of the pure, tahir, without any traces of impurity. Another version of this hadith goes back to Fatimah, who narrated that once Fatimah, but it all comes down to the same thing, that إِنَّمَا يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ لِيُذْهِبَ عَنْكُمْ رِجْسَ عَلَى الْبَيْتِ وَيُطَهِّرَكُمْ تَطْهِيرًا, that Allah wishes to remove this impurity from you, any impurity, all impurity from you, O people of the house, and to purify you. And when these groups were under their cloaks, the Christians were under their cloaks, he was under that cloak, the Christian bishop from Najran, under their head bishop, whose name was Abu Hari, came forward to do them, and he saw the whole thing, and he told the Christians at that time, he said to them, the bishop said, don't do this, for I've never seen such pious faces as these, and if they wanted to order the mountain to come to them, the mountain would come to them. And it's prudent to make a treaty with them rather than to engage in fighting with them because of their spiritual imminence. So that means that, you know, in that particular world, in that particular thing, this is the clear picture of where they stood in relationship to this other community, the Christian community. So then in Ramadan, just after this, he went on to the farewell pilgrimage. The Prophet ﷺ told Fatima a secret, and he says, as you know, Jibreel would recite the Quran to me and I to him once every year at Ramadan, but this year he recited to me twice, and I cannot but think that my time has come. And indeed, on his return from this farewell pilgrimage, the Prophet became seriously ill. So this is all the events that led up to that illness after that. And those final days he spent were spent in the apartment of his wife Aisha, radiallahu ta'ala anha. And when Fatima came to visit him, Aisha, sensing the finality of the situation, would leave the house to leave Fatima and her father together. And one day, the Prophet ﷺ summoned the Fatima to him, and when she came, he kissed her and whispered into her ear, and she began to cry. And then he whispered into her other ear, and she began to laugh. And Aisha saw this, and she said, "You're crying and you're laughing at the same time, Fatimah. What did he say to you?" And he said, "First he told me he's going to die in a short while and meet his Lord," and I cried. And then he said to me, "Don't cry, because you will be the first of my household who will join me," so I laughed. And not long after this, the Prophet ﷺ passed away, as Fatimah was grief-stricken and would often be seen weeping profusely. And one of the companions noted that he did not see Fatimah laugh any time after the death of her father. Now, the circumstances, and here we get into a very thorny situation surrounding the death of the Prophet ﷺ, and the events that immediately followed his death have given rise to most of the complications, or many of the complications, within our community. And I say our community because he says, "Men qala la ilaha illallah dakhala jannah." Whoever says la ilaha illallah dakhala jannah. Whoever says that enters. So that is our community. People who pray in the same direction, read from the same book, have the same prophet, call themselves Muslims, etc. We are one community. That's the truth of the matter. Though there are many forces that try to divide that, have divided that, have put us at odds with one another, in the actuality and truth of it, it's one community. But things happen which made splits inside of that community. And this big split came about the process of succession. And what would that mean for future generations? And how was this mission of the Prophet ﷺ, who was sent as a mercy for all of the creation, to be fulfilled in the matrix of history without his physical presence? How are we going to do this without the Prophet ﷺ? How was a community that was founded on the basis of mercy, founded on the basis of taqwa, how was it going to continue without the architect who had both revealed it and manifested it through his way of life and being, which is what we call the Sunnah? And did he leave behind him any instructions on the issue of who was to follow him? And if he did not, what was the wisdom behind that decision? And when you think that it's down to such small little things he talked about, like what foot you go into the masjid with, how do you do this, how do you do that, all of these things, I think it's very hard to think that he wouldn't have dealt with this in some way. So at the time of the farewell pilgrimage, and this both Sunnis and Shias are in agreement about, the Prophet said some very important things, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which the entire community agree upon. There's no argument about this. The only argument is about how to interpret what he said. And this is the hadith that Asqalani said in Fathul Bari. Both Tirmidhi and Nasa'i narrated this hadith, and it is supported by numerous chains of transmission, all of which are sahih. Men kanat mawlahu fa Ali mawlahu. Whose mawla I am, Ali is his mawla. Now some people translate that, whose friend I am, Ali is his friend. Some translate it, whose master I am, Ali is his master. But this is what he said: Men kanat mawlahu fa Ali mawlahu. You have to understand this word mawla. And the Prophet ﷺ said in the Sunnah, or the Sahih of al-Tirmidhi, Ana Madinatul Ilm. I am the city of knowledge. Wa Ali babuha. Ali is the gate to that city. La ahada yudkhil al-bayt illa min khalil bawaba. Bawaba. I am the city of knowledge. Ali is its gate, and one does not enter the house except through its gate. And Allah says, "Wa'tul buyuta min abwabiha wa atakullahu la'alakum tuflihun." Enter houses by their doors and be conscious of Allah, have taqwa of Allah, wa taqullah, so that you will be successful. So this is the bare bones facts. How it's interpreted is the cause of the problems. These sayings were heard or reported, given there was no sound system then, to approximately 114,000 of the companions at one time who went on that farewell Hajj. We've come from 170 people now to 114,000 people in this short time. So you can see what a dynamic thing was going on here and how many people had been attracted to this. There are further complicated these things by the events that surrounded the actual death of the Prophet in the house of Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha. And in this, Ibn Abbas reports and recorded as Sahih in Al-Bukhari. When the Apostle of Allah was on his deathbed and in the house, there were some people among them who was Umar al-Khattab. And the Prophet said, "Come, let me write for you a statement after which you will not go astray." And Umar said immediately, "He's sick, and you have the Quran and you have the Book of Allah, and that's enough for us. Go near so that the Prophet may write." Some other people said, "Go near so that he can write for you a statement after which you will not go astray." And what others, such as Umar, said, what he said, they caused a whole tamasha and argument and everything else about should they take it, should they not take it, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and the Prophet wound up saying, "Get out of here." And Ubaidullah Ibn Abbas used to say it was very unfortunate that his apostle was prevented from writing the statement for them because of their disagreement and noise. And in another hadith that is attributed to Sa'id bin Jubair, he says in Sahih Muslim, Ibn Abbas said, "Thursday, and what about Thursday?" And then he began to cry until I saw the tears falling down his cheek like strings of pearls. And he said, Allah's Messenger, peace be upon him, said, "Bring me the shoulder blade of the camel and an ink pot so that I can write you a document by following which you will never go astray." And they said, "He's in a state of delirium." Now, how you understand this and where you are on this, this is all the thing, but this is what happened. This is actually, as far as we know in history, what happened. Now, the first reaction of the people to the actual death of the Prophet ﷺ, everybody was shocked. There was disbelief and denial. I don't know how many of you have had a near one die, but you know that it's always like a lot of things go on when it happens. And so great was the love of the companions for the Prophet that they could not even believe he was dead. And so central was he to the life of the community that they could not imagine how could they go on without him. And when Umar heard that the Prophet had died, he was so distraught that he drew his sword and he said that these are the munafiqeen, they're pretending that he's dead, and I swear he did not die. By Allah, he did not die, and he has gone to join his Lord just as other prophets like Musa did. For 30 days he was absent from his people and he returned to them, after which they declared him dead. By Allah, the Prophet's going to come back just like Musa came back, and anybody who dares to perpetrate a lie such as the death of Muhammad, I will cut off his arms and legs. And people listened to Umar because after all he was Umar, and they were too stupefied to believe that a man who had transformed all of this, now we're talking here about 114,000 people up from 170,000 people, that such a thing could have happened. But Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu came confirming that the Prophet indeed, he was dead. And he entered into the masjid of the Prophet where Umar was speaking to the people, and he recited the following ayah. وَمَا مُحَمَّدٍ إِلَّا رَسُولٌ قَدْ خَلَتْ مِنْ قَبْلِهَا رُسُولٌ أَفَإِن مَّاتَ أَوْ قُتِلَ انقلبتم على أعقابكم ومن ينقلب عن عقبيه فلن يضر الله شيئا وسيجزي الله الشاكرين. Muhammad is only a messenger, and he is preceded by other messengers, and if he were to die or to be killed, would you turn away? Those who turn away do not harm Allah in any way. Allah will recompense the thankful. This is in Surah Al-Imran. And excuse my poor pronunciation, but the meaning of it is that Muhammad is only a messenger, and he's been preceded by other messengers, and if you were to die or to be killed, would you turn away from it? So this is what he had said. And urged by the community leaders to prevent an open rift, Abu Bakr, along with Umar, proceeded to Saqafa Bani Sa'idat, and in the courtyard where the Ansar were holding a meeting already to elect a leader, and one of the Ansar made the situation like this: we are the Ansar, we are the helpers of Allah, the army of Islam, you the Muhajirun, you're but a division of the army. Nonetheless, some amongst you have gone to extreme of seeking to deprive. It was already they're arguing and fighting about the whole situation. And Abu Bakr spoke to the Ansar and he says, "Oh Ansars, we are the Muhajireen, we were the first to accept Islam, we enjoy the noblest lineage and descent," and he brought all of that to them. So they were at this standoff between the two of them like that. So then what happened was that that taking the hand of Umar and Abu Ubaidah, who were seated on either side of him, Abu Bakr said, "Either one of these two men is acceptable as a leader of the Muslim community. Choose whoever you want." And this time Umar raised the hand of Abu Bakr and he said, "Abu Bakr, did not the Prophet order you to lead the Muslims in prayer? So you are a successor, and choosing you, we're choosing the best of all the Prophet loved and trusted." And everybody came forward and they gave the oath of allegiance to Abu Bakr, and it was a done deal. And while the above was all taking place, Ali was busy with the funeral preparations. Ali ibn Abbas and all of the Hashemiyah met to get ready to prepare the burial of the Prophet as per the wishes of the Prophet. He dug his grave in the very place in the room of Aisha where he had died his last, and Ali washed the body, and Ibn Abbas and Osama supplied the water, and Ali shrouded the body and offered the Salatul Janazah and the prayers, and they came to the various masajid and asked the Muslims to offer prayers in groups. First the family members of the Prophet went and offered their prayers, and then the Muhajireen followed by the Ansars, and so on and so forth like that. And when the prayers were over, the burial arrangements started. The Ansar requested Ali that they should be allowed to participate. Ali invited Awaz bin Khalil and different people, all of these people came and so forth like that. And in the end, it was all done. The whole thing was finished and so forth. And so the whole thing was basically a done deal. And there was nothing that could be done to change it. And so regarding the choosing of a successor which took place while Ali was involved in the rites of washing and the burial and so forth, he didn't give his bay'ah to this thing. But when Abu Sufyan approached him to declare himself the Khalif, Ali saw at once, because he was who he was, the dangers of the division in the community, and accepted the succession of Abu Bakr. According to Ibn Khaldun, he gave his bay'at 40 days after the death of the Prophet. And according to Ibn Kathir, this only happened after the death of Fatimah, 6 months after the death of the Prophet. I could go through a lot of stuff about all of this. I urge you to read the history books, understand for yourselves, understand all of these things. It's a very complex story. A lot of things happened, a lot of things went on. But where we are in the present day all stems from what happened at that time. All that we are suffering from suffers from what happened at that time. And how people have understood that, and how people understand that, and so on and so forth like that. And this is divided and continues to divide the community from then till now. That's the facts of the matter. But this talk is about Fatimah. So what about Fatimah in this time? Well, history, and we tried to tell you what happened, tells us how he died, and that his warnings to those who would oppress the members of his family. History tells us of sadness. History tells us the misery of Fatimah. It tells about all of these things. But the thing that really tells you the thing is what she said. And this is what she said. On the 8th day after the death of the Prophet, Fatimah alayha salam revealed the extent of her sadness and inability to bear life without her father. And she came to the masjid crying, and she said, "O my father, O my sincere friend, O Abu Qasim, O the helper of the widowed and the orphans, what do we have now for the Kaaba and the masjid? Who does your saddened and grieved daughter have?" And she went to go to the tomb of the Prophet. It was difficult for her to walk because her eyes were filled with tears. And when she passed the mimbar, she saw the mimbar, she passed out. And she said, she continued with her lament, and she says, my strength has been eradicated. My endurance has betrayed me. My enemies rejoice at my misfortune. My grief will surely kill me. Father, I am bewildered, I am lonely, I am confused, I am lonesome. My voice is subdued, my back is broken, my life is disturbed. There's no one, Father, after you to attend to my loneliness. No one to stop my tears, no one to support me in the time of weakness. Such precise revelations, the place of the descent of Jibreel, the location of Mikael, all these things have vanished. Oh my Father, motives of others have changed. Gates are shut in my face. I hate this world after you. And my tears are shed for you as long as any breath continues in me. And my longing for you shall not cease. My sadness is for being separated from you shall not vanish. And then she cried out loudly, Father, when you died, went the light of all of the world. The flowers in this world have withered after blossoming in your presence. Oh, my Father, I will forever be sorrowful for you until we are brought together again. Oh, my Father, sleep has deserted me since we have been separated. Oh, my Father, who is there for the widows and the orphans? Who will we have for the Ummah until the day of Yom Kiyamah? Oh, my Father, after you, we are all oppressed. Oh, Father, after you, we are shunned. We were glorified by your presence here upon this earth. And what tears shall not spill upon your departure? What sadness after you shall not continue to exist? You are the spring of faith. You are the light of the prophets. How can the mountains not sway and the seas not dry up? How the earth itself not tremble? O Father, I am afflicted with the greatest of sorrows, and my disaster is not a small thing, my Father. I have been inflicted with the greatest misfortune, with the greatest calamity. The angels cry for you. The stars cease to move because of you. Your mimbar cries for you. Your mimbar is empty of your secret conversations with your Lord. Your grave is the only thing that is joyful because it holds you. And paradise is delighted with your presence. But we here on this earth are lost and bereft without you. Oh, supplication and prayers, supplications and prayers. This is all I have to ask for. So this was her state. She says, Father, without your presence, how cheerless are the places where we used to meet you. How pained I am for you until I can join you. How bereaved is Abu Hassan, the entrusted one, yani her husband, the father of your two sons, Hassan and Hussein. Abu Hassan, your beloved, he who you raised in his youth and made your brother as a man, the most beloved of your companions. Abu Hassan, who was the first to come to your aid and support, sadness has overtaken us both, and crying will kill us, and anguish and heartache will accompany us forever. This is the state. This is the state. So, whatever you think of what it was and how to go on, somehow things had to go on. And so that's how things went on. Things went on a political level. There was a decision made, there was a political decision, basically. Because what else could they do? There was, as I say, 114,000 people now to deal with. And somebody had to deal with them. And so, Abu Bakr, who was the friend, he was the one who dealt with them. And after him, Umar dealt with them. And after him, Uthman dealt with them. And all of those men would always consult Ali in what they did, and that was the situation, and that's been the situation from then until now. But what is not really understood and what is not really known, and not what is really clear to people is, what did Ali do during all those years? Did he just like kind of go home and lie down and cry for you know, up to 26 years? Or what did he do? So basically what he did was to continue what the Prophet ﷺ did in the beginning of his mission in Dar al-Arqam. He organized halaqah, he organized meetings, he brought, people came to visit, and he kept teaching. And we believe, as Sufi people, we believe that that's what Sufism is. Sufism is exactly what he taught during those years. We don't take sides. We don't take sides. Allah says, this is ummatan wasatan. This is that you are the people of the middle way. So we don't take sides. We say, okay, this is the reality of the situation. The reality. What we have to do is, how are we going to continue? How are we going to go on? So Ali, in all that time, what he did was he helped those people when they asked for help, and so on and so forth, but he continued the thing. So what we can say is that with the death of the Prophet ﷺ, the Nubuwah for sure died, because he says, Muhammadan yani huwa khatam al-anbiya. He is the seal of the prophets. And so the prophecy, there is no prophecy after Muhammad. What there is after Muhammad ﷺ is wilayat. Wilayat means spiritual authority or spiritual mastery. And this is what, and this is who this man Ali was. This is, as he said, I am the city of knowledge, and Ali is the gate to that knowledge, and you enter a house by the gate, and so people enter the house by the gate, and this is how we get to the knowledge. We get to the knowledge through Ali, alayhi salam. He is our teacher. And like him, we don't blame people, we don't argue with people, we're not in any way like that, we just continue on. So a decision was reached how to obtain, because the problem was they couldn't go on if these people were opposed to it. So how could they do it? How could they make the thing? So they did it by one way or another way or something, of this way and the other way, until a modus vivendi was worked out by which things continued, because there was no alternative to going on. But it killed Fatimah. It killed Fatimah. And one of the things that killed her, that caused her great pain, was the argument about fadak and about the orchards of this, which were to support her family. Because you know how Ali earned his living. He earned his living as what's called a hamala, which is somebody who carries loads on his back. He used to carry things for people on their back, because he said they will only pay me, and he worked mainly for Jews, because there were a lot of Jews in the oases there. Because he said they'll only pay me what they'll pay me, and they won't pay me a penny more or a penny less, and it'll be enough. So in addition to his teaching and everything else like that, he earned his living day after day by carrying loads for people. And so when there was this thing which the Prophet had left, this thing of fadak, this oasis, this would have meant the means that he left to Fatima, this would have meant the means where he could have retired from that and spent all of his time in teaching and taking care of that, but he couldn't do that. So this was really, you know, the very terrible difficulty for her on that thing. And we know from the thing in Surah Hashr, Allah says, whenever booty that Allah gives to His messenger belongs to Allah and to the messengers and to near relatives. And Abu Bakr said, no, it doesn't consist, she's not a near relative because she's a girl. She's a woman. And women can't inherit. They don't inherit. Only men inherit. And Ali is not his relative in that sense. So she can't inherit, so she can't have it. So that's the way, anyway, that's what happened. So whatever, again, read the history, understand the history, you know, but in the end you see that all of this are the divisions that have kept us and keep us apart over all of these centuries about what happened in these crucial times. But for some people, what we say is, okay, this happened, all of this happened. But what did happen was this teaching continued. And it went on, and we have inherited that teaching into the present time. And I don't know if I can go, you know, further on beyond that. I want to go on further than that and talk about it, but I feel that, you know, I want to leave you, because, again, we reached 11 o'clock. I want to leave you just with the understanding of the terrible events that happened in that time, which we've still not recovered from. We have not been able to recover from this thing because these people of politics are the ones who are in control, not the people of spirituality. People of spirituality are not in control. The people they call the ulama, some of them are people of spirituality, but most of them are, like what we said, they are, you know, pious law clerks. That's what they do. They decide, you know, what's right and what's wrong, and so on and so forth, on the basis of things. But what controls our community is it's not controlled by spirituality. It's controlled by political concerns. So we have this boy. A year ago, what I saw on the TV, this boy, a Muslim boy, with a machine gun in Syria, shooting people coming from prayer, other Muslims. This is what we've come to. This is what we've come to in Afghanistan. This is what we've come to in Libya. This is what we've come to in Mali. This is what we've come to in Somalia. This is what we've come to all over the Muslim world. Muslims killing Muslims for one reason and another. To the point where, as I told you, 81% of the people killed in Afghanistan, all of whom are Muslims, are killed by other Muslims. Only 19% are killed by the invaders, the kafirun. This problem, we have to, in some way, understand and confront this problem, understand what has gone on by allowing the politicians to rule our lives instead of the people of, like the Prophet ﷺ was a man of the spirit. He was a spiritual teacher. Yes, he was also, he ran things and he did things and so on and so on and so forth. He did all those things, but primarily he was the man who talked with angels. Where do we have a king who talks with angels? You see. So I will leave you with this, you know, to dwell upon this, to think upon this, and again, the last part, you know, because there is a way out of this, and the way out of it, you know, is an understanding that Allah has a Jalal side and a Jamal side, and that there is the Kamal. There is a place in between, as he said, the people of the middle. And this is what we have to understand. We have to become, in the community, the people of the middle. We have to become the people who can accept both of these sides and allow them to be, as he's already said, the differences in my community are a blessing. Allow them to be, and to go forward and be inclusive and learn how to, that we can live with each other instead of killing each other. This is a very important issue. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. Ar-Rahmanir-Rahim. Maliki yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim. As-sirata alladhina an'amta alayhim. Ghayril maghdubi